So our third condition, once again, is just called an untrue condition. But let's look at this. If I had studied, I would have passed the test. All right, so let's look again at our grammar structure. So what is, if we went from simple present to simple past, well, what is the past of the past? Well, that's past perfect. What is the past perfect? Past perfect is just, for structure-wise, we have now, we have the present. One step back is a simple past. That's where we do our storytelling. And one step back is the past perfect. And that solves a whole bunch of complex elements in grammar structure. But that's the furthest you can ever go back, is the past perfect. We'll do a lot of lessons on past perfect. But in this case, we're building our infrastructure out of the past perfect and would with the present perfect. There you go. Two types of grammar structure that people hate that are put together to build this sensation. So what is this? Oh man, yeah, I know. If I'd studied, I would have passed the test. What is this? What is this emotion? This is regret and remorse. As I tell my kids, brush your teeth before bed. No, as I tell my kids, is that in life, you only make mistakes on things you know. It's true. If you're doing a test and you absolutely don't know what the question is, you'll leave it blank and move on to the next one. But if you think you know, well, you're going to try and answer that question. And you're going to get confused by the question. That's the whole point of why tests are the way they are. It's not just for memory, but it's also to confuse you, especially math. And what's going to confuse you and the mistakes you're going to make are how you feel while you do that question. So we make mistakes because when we're doing things we know, we are distracted. We're distracted by the way we feel. Maybe we're anxious. Maybe we didn't sleep properly last night, so it's physiological. It's not just subjective, it's objective. Maybe that we're daydreaming about buying a million cochinas. Whatever it is, we only make mistakes on things we know. And so this sensation, it's a shitty sensation. Yeah, I know. If I'd studied, I would have passed the test. But I'm going to do it differently this time. Yeah. So what is this? This is what we call hindsight. And we have an expression in English, the hindsight is 20/20, which from previous experience, hindsight is fucked, essentially, because 2020 was a fucking doozy. So what do we mean? 20/20 means perfect vision. You can see perfectly in your left eye for 20 meters and 20 meters with your right eye. And this idea means that when you think about a problem, a mistake you made in your past, when you look in the past, the first thing you see is what you did wrong. Do I have one of my shitty books around here somewhere? I do. Let me just hop out of here for a second and then pull one of these shitty books. This terrible, not terrible, it's a thing. This is the first book I wrote. And when I wrote this book, I did it all myself. The editing on anything I'm semi-dyslexic, and you'll see that as I write here. As I forget words, I spell words wrong, and I see words upside down. When I wrote my book and when I edited, especially and did the copy editing, I didn't see everything because I'm dyslexic. And so there were a lot of errors and mistakes in this, like visual mistakes. And the irony is, when you get like your physical copy, you think it's perfect. You spent like the last 6 weeks just reading it 1,000 times over and finding errors and fishing for like grammar mistakes. And then the first thing you open when you look at the book is a fucking mistake. That's just the way it is. And that's like when we look in the past, the first thing we see is what we did wrong. The things we didn't notice while we were doing it because we were distracted for some way or another. Some of us are dyslexic for words, and some of us are dyslexic for life. Yeah, as you're doing things, you see things upside down, round and round, and back to front. I mean, maybe you're seeing me upside down right now. I have no idea. Sorry. All right. So this brings us back to hindsight is 20/20. So what do we? I made an equation a few years ago. I put in one of my shitty stories. H equals F minus I. What do we mean? We mean hindsight equals foresight minus insight. What does that mean? It means the reason you have hindsight, the reason you're looking back is you're fucked up. The reason you fucked up is because you tried to make a prediction about something. That's foresight, your ability to kind of look at your environment now and make a prediction or an outcome based on that environment without insight. What is insight? It's some type of knowledge about the environment of which you're working. So the reason we have hindsight is because we make predictions without knowing about what we're investing in. For example, maybe you decided to download an investor app, a home broker, and then you decided to buy one share of a certain company, but you thought the app was broken and you pressed the button 10 times and you didn't realize, and you accidentally borrowed $64,000 that you didn't have, and then you realized you were fucked. Maybe that happened. Why did that happen? That happened because you tried to make a prediction without taking the time to watch the actual video that teaches you how to buy that one share, because the videos are boring. So maybe that happened. Totally happened. But either way, that's why we have our hindsight, because we fucked up. And we fucked up because we did things without paying attention, or we did things without knowing exactly what we're doing. All right, so we can say that this is a pretty negative sensation. One of the reasons I don't like hindsight is because hindsight forces you to look at the mistake you made and see what you did wrong and go, yep, I know, I'm awesome. What it doesn't teach you or force you to do is to look for the reason as to why you make the mistakes you make. That's why you need a therapist, or ayahuasca, because essentially, underneath that, more than likely, it's the exact same reason that provokes every single mistake you ever make, more than likely. But this grammar structure says, oh yeah, I know, if I'd done this, it would have worked. I'm incredible. No. This grammar structure reminds you, unfortunately, it is insulting. Why? Because it reminds you that you are an idiot. Essentially, that's what it does. It tells you you're an idiot, that you knew how to do this and you didn't review your work, you rushed your way into it, you didn't look properly at every word, you didn't read it properly. But whatever that reason it is, it's an insulting thing. But not always. So let's look at that same grammar structure and let's look at something different. In fact, let's take something from 2 and we'll mix it with 3. So let's look at 2. So for example, I am I'm published. I mean, I fucking do it myself, and I really don't see the point in publishers anymore, outside of maybe the money for a bit of marketing, but really I don't, all that shit aside. So look, I'm a self-published writer. You know, I've published 22 novels in the last 10 years myself. And look, I still fight to get major publishing. It's the idiotic fucking pursuit of an artist is recognition and validation from people who wear skivvies. Okay, so we can say, for example, well, I'm not published. So we say, well, if I lived in New York, I would get published. All right. We know it's not true. You know, I'm not published because my books are shit. That's principally the reason why I'm not published, because I don't write good stories. But let's live in Kean's imagination land. So this is us doing our second condition. Our verb is in the past, and then we have would and get. Fantastic. Well, you say, well, why didn't you move to New York? Well, I'll say because I'm a single father living in the countryside of Brazil. I can't and won't leave and move to New York because I fucking love my kids. You know, I have my kids 50-50, and I'm not going to abandon them, even though that would probably make them into brilliant artists. But all right, so I say, well, if I didn't have kids, I would move to New York. All right, so once again, grammar structure, we're doing the same thing. It's just our second condition. Our verb is in the past. An unrealistic scenario. It doesn't teach us how to get rid of our kids. I've tried. Too late. Sorry, abortion joke. And our outcome is, in that perfect world, what would you do? You know, if I didn't have kids, I'd move to New York. All right, well, why is that a fucking terrible sentence? Because I fucking love my kids. You know, imagining not having kids is the nightmare that every time they go to their mom's house doesn't let me sleep at night, because I fucking love them to death. And then I have to bombard my daughter with fucking messages on WhatsApp every 45 minutes. Love you. Because I love my fucking kids. Yeah, I'm gonna even imagine that thought. But let's say I did imagine that thought and say, well, the reason I don't move to New York is because I have kids. And the reason I don't get published is because I don't live in New York. Well, the result of that is that you end up resenting your children. You do. And mums and dads around the world all do that throughout their lives. They'll tell their kids when they're older, when their kid is being spoiled and selfish is what human beings are. They go, I gave up my dreams for you. I could have been a ballet dancer. I could have been famous. And parents inevitably will. They'll make that sacrifice. And then when they want to be a spoiled little asshole themselves, they'll say that the reason that they didn't live to their potential is because they gave themselves to their children and did that. And they didn't realize that was your fucking potential. That was the great thing you did. But either way, engaging in this thought, you'll end up resenting either the life you have or that which is truly important to you. So we asked the question, Kim, well, why do you write? Well, this story here, A Rising Fall, I'm actually going to do a fucking video on this fucking down the track, but this story was in my head for about 10 years. In fact, my best friend Adam, I helped him kind of with lyrics for a concept album fucking before some shit happened with our band, which will also become an interesting video, years ago. And the concept was, A Rising Fall. It was this kind of post-apocalyptic world. And after that album, which was an industrial kind of metal album with classical overtures, of course. This story was in my head for about 10 years. And, I would tell everyone fucking what was it about, the philosophical fucking kind of the core and the premise of that story. But I never knew how to write a story because I grew up around musicians. Right from when I got plucked out of the world at the ripe old age of 19 or 20, I was around fucking guys who were already established musicians. Now, I didn't know how to play an instrument, but I grew up around like engineers and people who made their own art, made their own music. But I didn't grow up around writers, so I didn't know where or how to start. And then my son was about to be born, Tomas, and maybe he was 3 months away. And I already had a 2-year-old daughter, and I was thinking, fuck, I got to do something. I'm about to have 2 kids. I got to get my shit together. I have to do something right now. So I started writing this book, A Rising Fall. And I wrote it in about 14 or 15 days. It was an intense process. And that was pretty much Pandora's box. The moment I wrote my first novel, that was it. I was now hooked. That was, in some ways, like partly responsible for like me being distant in my marriage. Not totally responsible for the end, but partly that's my blame in that thing. But that was it. I was hooked. I wrote 9 novels in 9 months. And over a 10-year period, I got to the point where I've written 22 novels. The only reason I write books is because of my kids. That's the absolute God-given truth. And maybe there's some truth to this. Maybe living in the countryside of Brazil, where writing in Portuguese doesn't make a difference, because this is not a country where this is a country where people love being together with people. They love barbecues, they love football, they love their MMA, because Brazil is best in the world. But it's like, as a writer, look, anywhere in the world, there's no money in writing. If you're writing books, it's because you either didn't get hugged enough as a child or you got hugged too much, essentially. But there's no money in it whatsoever. But there's less of it here. So maybe there's some truth to the matter. If I moved to New York, then maybe there would be a greater chance of getting an agent to represent me. If the fact that I could bang on someone's window until they got tired of seeing me, they read my manuscript. But then that would be beautifully ironic. The only reason I write is because of my kids, and the only reason then that I feel that I can't get that representation is because I live in the countryside, and I live in the countryside because I love my fucking kids. So let's look at a better way to use that third condition. Well, if I hadn't had kids, I wouldn't have started writing. All right, so once again, grammar. We see past perfect and we see present perfect with would. All right, so we're not expressing hindsight. It's a version of hindsight, but we're not expressing regret or remorse. What's the word I'm looking for? We're expressing, that's it, gratefulness. Now, when you think of the word grateful, you think of someone on Instagram, maybe some girl on a beach in a bikini on some deserted island, that the only way you can get to that island is if you have a boyfriend who is a chief executive officer at Goldman Sachs, and that you're able to kill 16 locals to find the secret location to get to this island. And you're there in a yoga pose with your perfect body and the sun just gleaming on the back of you, and everything is shimmering like a perfectly cooked croissant. And you say the words, grateful. Fuck you. That's what you're really telling people is go fuck yourself. My life is better than your life. Gratefulness is not telling people what you have. First of all, gratefulness is not telling people anything. Gratefulness is for you. True gratefulness is looking back at not the things in your hand, the house, the car, all that. It's the experiences you've had, good and bad, especially bad. Going back and reconciling with your past. That's what this grammar does. It helps you reconcile with your past. It forces you to reconcile with your past. And what does that mean? That means looking at the things that would have caused you scorn or shame or regret or remorse and just hugging the shit out of them. And going, yeah, that's right. That's the reason, those decisions, there were no good or bad decisions. Those bad decisions were the best decision that I could make at that moment because of the situation. And hugging the shit out of it. And all of a sudden feeling a little lighter about yourself. True gratefulness is this. It's like, it's realizing something and going, yeah, that's true. That's gratefulness. Gratefulness isn't fucking creating a post and telling your friends, I'm grateful for my iPhone 72. No, you're being an asshole. That's all. You're an attention-seeking glitch in the system. So this grammar structure, we're doing the same thing, but when I do it this way, it forces me to reconcile. It's fucking beautiful. I had a marriage that ended after 9 years. Everything ends. Look, here's a tricky one for all of you people in love. Everything ends in death or divorce. And that's a beautiful thing on its own. It's scary. It's why half the time we're scared to fall in love or we're scared to care, because at the end of it, it's the pain and the hurt. We're going to read a story about this down the line. But a lot of people don't like the person that broke their heart. And they don't like it because the person broke their heart. But the reality is, if I hadn't come to Brazil, fucking like a madman, but if I hadn't married my ex, not only my kids, but I wouldn't have found the peace and joy in the world, or in myself especially, that I have right now. And it's true. And so you can sit there and look at past experiences and go, fuck that person. Or you can sit there and look at the past experience and not the person, but the fact that you made the choice to be with that person, that you made the choice to do things, good and bad. And look, as people, generally, we normally see ourselves today better than we were 6 months ago or 6 years ago. That's just the nature of being a human being. We're constantly, as humans, we're less like Sweden and Finland, and we're more like Brazil and maybe Uzbekistan. We're always in development. We're not a developed country ever. And as much as there are parts of us that are good and perfect, there are other parts that are left astray, that are falling apart and cause us a great concern. And we're constantly trying to fix them, and when we fix them, something else goes astray. But we know that today you're better than you were 6 months ago because you're trying. You're doing your bit. And your brain does it, your ego does it without you even wanting to. The ego says, I'm fucking perfect. And in my past, my shadow, I was a piece of shit, but now I'm fucking great. And so a part of that, though, comes from not just the things that occurred, but the choices you made that took you there. And so this grammar structure, instead of feeling terrible for dumb things, here, we're reconciling with those dumb things. This is not a dumb thing, by the way. I willingly, both me and my ex-wife chose to have our 2 children, and absolutely love them to fucking death. But like in any aspect, it's you looking into your past at those decisions you've made, and feeling real gratefulness. All right, so that's our 3 conditions. What we see is the 3rd condition and the 2nd condition. There are 2 ways that we can look in that condition. One way does not solve any problems. It's just us generally that will make you feel terrible, whereas the other aspect solves problems. Even then, when we looked at our first condition, we had other ways of looking at that condition as well. We were looking at negotiating problems, and there's a lot more of this. We're going to, down the line, do a class based only on the first condition, a class based only on the 2nd condition, and a class based only on the 3rd, and probably various classes on each one. This was like a long introduction to the idea, and as well to show you how we go about grammar. Like I said, our focus is not just to look at the structure, the rule, and then just repeat that shit like a parrot. No. What I want to look at is like why we say the things we say. You know, what are we trying to do? And at that same point, like, what is the language that makes sense to me in my subjective experience? And why, when I say it to you, do you not feel as special as I do when I think it inside my head? And that is the great complication. We solve that shit, and then people will stop freaking out the difference between, for example, Allah and God, that they're the same fucking thing, or that an atheist is identical to a religious fucking evangelical. That the absence of God is as divine as God itself. That to say that God does not exist is the proof of saying that God exists. There's semantics. It's just touching and scratching a part inside someone's existential experience and saying some set of words out loud that removes that scratch and that itch. That's it. All right, listen, thank you so much for this class. I know it was a long one. As I mentioned before, maybe you might be seeing this, you might have dyslexic computers. You might be seeing this video upside down. You might be seeing me upside down in this video. From what I've heard from my technical specialists, I know some people who work with developing, not computers, just developing, Kodak camera prints, is that to solve this problem, it's pretty simple. Just click like, subscribe, and share this shit to as many people as you know. And I'll see you for the next class. Thank you so much. Listen, as I say, I'm going to say in every video, and I say to every one of my students, love the people who love you. Everyone else is just a piece of shit.